Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order of April 10th of the Operations Board. Hey, Martin. So, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Hans? To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call?
Are we? Thank you, Chair. Operations Board Director Palacios. Here. Bernal. Here. Huffaker. Here. Jordan. Here. We're not getting much sound from Santa Cruz. Bauman. Here. Uslar. Here. Greathouse. Here. Espinoza is absent but on his way. Johnson.
Here.
Vice Chair Corpus is absent but on his way. Chair Mendez.
Here. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So, moving on. Next on the agenda is public comment for matters not listed on the agenda. So you will be provided 3 minutes to speak. So is there any member of the public wishing to address the board? And for the remote locations, any member from the public?
No public comment in San Luis Obispo.
No comment? No comment in Santa Cruz.
Is that it? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda? Great. Next is approval of the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board wishing to pull any items from the agenda? Nobody? Okay, great. Any member of the public wishing to address the board on the consent agenda items? Okay, so if I don't hear anything from the remote locations, I'm going to assume that there's nobody.
There's no one here.
Okay,
no
thank
remote
you.
public comment here.
Good. Thank you. I'm now looking for a motion on the consent agenda. Moved by Board Member Usler. Second. Second by Matt. Any further discussion? All in favor? Approve?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Oppose? Thank you, guys. Now, moving to the regular agenda. Presentation or update by the Community Advisory Council Chair, Jeff Bryan.
Thank you, Chair Mendez. My name is Jeff Byron, chair of the Community Advisory Council. And again, I feel my role is to slow your meeting down. You move along at a much quicker pace than I do. As you recall, I was in Monterey at your February meeting that was foreshortened, so I didn't have a chance to report out. So I have a number of meetings to report to you. This is staff report item 8, I believe. We had a meeting back on January 17th. We discussed a number of different items, presentations by the staff, J.R. Killigrew on the Monterey Bay Community Power enrollment customer rebate updates. We were astounded by these numbers, 268,000 customers, 10,000 net energy metering customers. And I can tell you that the council is very interested in tracking the growth of the net energy metering customers. We also had a presentation from Mr. Killigrew on the draft energy programs policy. I believe this policy originated from our vice chair, Ms. Levon, and there was certainly a need for it. This will help us with guidance and establishing criteria that will inform the staff and us to better invest in focused energy programs which have the maximum impact on the JPA goals and MBCP's business as an electric utility. Moving down to the third underlined, EV incentive programs. This is old news. Ms. Trenchard gave us an update on this, and I believe you've already moved this forward. The item at the bottom of the first page, building code adoption. Ms. Trenchard also gave us an update on this item, and the council supported the staff recommendation. There was significant community support for this action. The CAC also encourages elected and administrative officials to provide leadership in adopting EV infrastructure codes for new and existing buildings. We actually had an original presentation on this back in November, and Mr. Pike, who made that presentation, is going to be providing an update and a presentation at our next meeting, which will be next week. Beth Trenchard also presented an update on the solar installations on single-family affordable housing, and the council supported staff recommendations to direct all the funds from FY 18-19, which isn't very much, to be directed on single-family affordable housing with multiple use dwellings targeted for next year. We also had a meeting in February on the 21st. I think this was about a week after your last meeting, and we conducted a number of business items. We had a presentation from the Tri-County Transit Agencies on transportation and the potential for electrification from Ms. Hunter Harvath, the Assistant General Manager of Monterey Salinas Transit, Ms. Mary Gilbert, the Executive Director of San Benito Council of Governments, and Barrow Emerson, the Santa Cruz Metro Planning and Development Manager, and Aaron Alvey from the Santa Cruz Metro Electric Bus Infrastructure Project Manager and Santa Cruz Metropolitan Transit District. The CAC was very impressed that the staff was able to coordinate presentations from all three of these organizations in very short order in response to interest on the part of the members and some of the public at a previous meeting. And I certainly would like to thank them and the presenters for all their time and effort. It gave us a lot of insight as a group into the budgets, the funding, and the challenges going forward to meet the stringent new California requirements on electrification of their fleets. And this information, I believe, will serve the Community Advisory Council on future recommendations that you'll receive from us. Moving down, there was, at the bottom of page 2, the electrification strategic plan scope of work was presented by Ms. Trenchard, and the CAC sees this plan as an essential element in determining and funding future electrification projects. So we were very let's say, supportive of that moving forward and as soon as possible. There was a presentation by MBCP staff, Matt Willis, and the council members supported it to seek operations of board of directors approval on the microgrid Smart Connect program as an alternative to the Go Local program. I believe you well, I can't remember now if you've taken action on this one yet or if you will, but we supported it, and I think it's either on your agenda or was on it last February. But there were a number of notable observations and recommendations that were made by the CAC members, and I'd like to highlight those for the consideration of this board. These are the bulleted items that I have there. And a number of discussions ensued during the meeting on this. The program should be characterized as a pilot so as to contain community expectations and limit the number of projects to a manageable few, or I'll say a manageable number. We also were we've thought very highly that proposal selection criteria should be developed that maximize the goals of the MBCP, including a minimum renewable energy requirement, should be considered or encouraged for program projects to also reflect MBCP goals. And I add these with my own comment, having started a business that was all about cogeneration years ago, and helping companies in Silicon Valley be more efficient with their use of natural gas. Times have changed somewhat, and we really want to make sure that we're promoting renewables and the other technologies that have come into cost competitiveness here particularly so as they meet the goals of MBCP. And then in the abundance of caution, we had some additional Brown Act training from our general counsel. And I have to say that it's not the members of the Community Advisory Council that need it, it's I do. I want plenty of opportunity for open discussion, and I think he's always being very cautious with me to make sure we do this such that we can have that open discussion. We did cancel our March 21st meeting, and we conducted a workshop on March 30th, which I'll talk about here in a moment. A majority of the council members attended that workshop. It was conducted by the staff. Let's see, we did have a quorum, so we actually opened it up as a public meeting that was noticed, but we really didn't take any action whatsoever. Again, this was just so that we could be very outspoken and not have to be reserved in any of our comments. I would say that the workshop was a tremendous opportunity to solicit input and feedback from the community, and really helped provide us with a lot of input. I'd say by most any measures, and certainly mine, the workshop was a resounding success. In addition to about 40 or 50 public participants, we had members of the operation board that were present, local elected officials, representatives of some elected officials also attended, and following short presentations by our staff on 3 different subjects: transportation electrification, building electrification, distributed energy, and also underrepresented communities. We then broke out into different sessions. Those were going so well that Mr. Killigrew went ahead and threw an extra one in. So everybody had an opportunity to participate in as many as 3 different sessions. I thought the staff did an excellent job of coordinating leaders and providing note takers for each of those background sessions. We have not had an opportunity as a council to kind of get together and review that. We will next week, but it was a rich opportunity for all of our members to engage with the public, and we'll be sharing our observations next week at our meeting, April 18th at 6 p.m. I'll close with just a personal comment. I believe MBCP has created, with these 3 different boards, a really complicated structure. It certainly represents challenges for the staff to support all of us, but it's been, in my mind, tremendous value to the community for input and transparency. So I think it's unique that MBCP does this, and it's been a real asset. But can't understate, I just can't imagine how the staff can support 3 different boards. And having said that, we've also gotten tremendous support, and I want to commend them and all the members of my commission who are also volunteers for their efforts. That concludes my lengthy report, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, and I'll stand for any questions.
No, thank you. That was very informative. Any questions from the board? Okay, any member of the public wishing to address the board on this item? Great. Thank you, Chair Bryan. That was a great report. Good to see there's a lot of great work underway. Moving forward to item number 9, report by the policy board. Mr. Shabashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were expecting Director McShane to be here to make that report, but he hasn't made it yet, so I'm going to make that report on his behalf, if that's okay with the board.
Yes.
The policy board did reappoint the chair and vice chair for another term. So we've got Mr. Bruce McPherson as well as Mr. McShane. They will be serving as the chair and vice chair. Also, the reappointed 3 of the advisory commission members. Those 3 members had a 1-year term because we are doing staggered terms with the advisory board. So now those 3 have been reappointed again to a 3-year term. They received an update for MCP's outreach and engagement activities. And I believe you're going to be receiving the same report today. And also they approved the mid-year report because we needed to update that, and we'll continue to update it. And I'll be speaking to you about it very shortly in my report. And finally, they approved an extension of my contract for another 3 years. And that is the report from the policy board.
Great. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Any member of the public wishing to address the board on this item? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the CEO's report, item number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start with staffing update, and there are 3 people that I would like to introduce. Sage Lang. Sage? Sage is hired as the program coordinator, and Sage is a resident of Monterey. She has experience working as a postgraduate researcher in with the Social Responsibility and Sustainability Department in University of Edinburgh. She also has experience working with the Monterey Aquarium as well as the Environmental Defense Fund. Happy to have her. She's already hit the ground running, and we got quite a few programs that she's working on and has been for the past couple of months now. We also hired Marcela Castro, and Marcela comes to us from, she's the manager of human resources. She comes to us from a law firm that she used to work at in Irvine, California. Experience of almost 20 years in paralegal work, and the last 6 years of her work were all in human resources. Very glad to have her. We've been trying to get an HR manager for some time, and now we got one in-house. Last but certainly not least is Lena Williams. She joined us. Where's Lena? Oh, here's Lena. She is joining us as the manager of Energy Account Services. Lena has 15 years of experience working inside and outside sales, and working also in training of business development and account management. Her most recent experiences with Tesla, and before that she was with Solar City. That is the staffing update. Also, I'm happy to report that we've, as you probably know, we've gotten approval from the policy board to have an inside counsel, general counsel, and we had that back in October of last year. We finally landed a good one. He's sitting right there next to you, Mr. Chairman. We've made an offer, and Rob have accepted. We need to get that confirmed by the policy board during the June meeting, and if the policy board approves, then Rob will start with us comes July 1st. I want to very much thank Director Bauman for suggesting that we go to the Monterey County to seek some help to get us a general counsel. He started it, and very much appreciate Rob's work with us, and we think he's going to be a great general counsel for us. Thank you, sir.
Not too sure that was your 10.
Power supply rates, I've been reporting on this almost every month now since last November. The expectations, the PG&E was going to have new power supply rates that include PCIA, or power charge and difference adjustment rates. Back in November, we would have probably should have known about it way back when. They have been postponing, and along with them, we have been postponing making the adjustment because our rates are very much dependent on their rates as well as their PCIA rates. This has been going on now for a number of months, and we still get another postponement from them that is likely to push the new rates to July 1st of this year or later. So that's my report. We're going to wait until June and report what came of their decision and whether we're going to be going July 1st with new rates or we're going to have to push it even further. We did have two RFOs for power supplies, one that we did ourselves, and the other one we're working on to issue very shortly, most likely in the next couple of weeks, working with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, similar to what we've done in the past. The one that we have done on our own rendered a number of offers. We looked at them, have been looking at them for the last couple of weeks, and didn't like any of them, so we're probably going to hold off on trying to start talking to any of the ones that made the offers, and maybe pursue some negotiations with one or two of them, try to get the prices down to a manageable number, and if we can succeed in doing so, then we will negotiate with our party. If not, then we'll just move on and focus more on RFO that we are doing with Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Finally, actually, we still have a few more to report on. The mid-year report is before you. That is the same one that we have shared with the policy board. It looks very much like the one that you had before, with only one change. It's likely that we're going to see the revenues being about a little over $1 million more than what we expected a number of months back. The balance comes in because the sales were less than expected by somewhere around $9 million, but the costs have dropped by $10 million. So the net result is we are looking at about $1 million more net revenue than what we did back when we put the budget together. And if you have any questions about those numbers, just feel free to ask. The enrollment of Morro Bay as well as San Luis Obispo are now done. We've received certification from the California Public Utilities Commission, basically saying your amendment to the implementation plan is fine, and now you can go ahead and prepare to enroll those two cities effective January 1st. That's the earliest we can enroll them. So we have a little time between now and then to do all the work that we need to do in order to bring them in. Comes January 1st, and that's the plan. January 1st of 2020, all of the customers in the two cities will be part of Monterey Bay Community Power. Finally, we have been working for the last couple of months now to try to bring in the entire county of San Luis Obispo. I made a 2-day trip with Chairman McPherson as well as JR, and talked to a number of people, the mayors of the cities, the supervisors of the county, and the city managers of the cities as well. A second trip that I made with Chairman McPherson to visit with a couple of supervisors down in San Luis Obispo who were still on the fence. And a third one I will be making with JR in the next Monday through Wednesday of next week, again to conduct a bunch of meetings and make a few presentations to city councils. JR has already have made, I don't know how many trips, but too many to count, constantly going back and forth trying to bring everybody together into eventually joining. We are sitting at a time frame of July, at the end of July, for them to be able to approve resolutions and ordinances, and right after that, we'll be able to put the implementation plan to bring them all in and submit it to the CPUC before the end of this year. And that, Mr. Chairman, is my report. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the board? Chair Corpus?
Thank you, Chair. Tom, the addition of a new CEO and board members at the PG&E, will that change the power rate outlook and the PCIA position that they've had in the past?
Not necessarily. All we know is that that the CEO came from Tennessee Valley Authority, as you probably may have already read, that his focus is going to be on safety issues and trying to bring PG&E out of the bankruptcy as soon as possible. A large number of the new directors that were appointed to PG&E's board, I guess, are from the banking industry or the hedge fund industry, and that's not making the governor very happy because he feels that PG&E need to focus on safety, and getting hedge fund managers on their board may not be the best thing for safety of the system. None of them is talking about PCIA. It's not on anybody's radar screen. That is a process that's moving in a different direction at the CPUC, and we're still working with the CPUC and all the other parties to try to manage a way to get the PCIA to be at a minimum stable and as low as we possibly can make it.
Thank you.
Director Usler.
Thank you. Tom, can you share with us what the concerns might be among the Board of Supervisors for the County of San Luis Obispo? You said they are on the fence still?
They have considered forming their own CCA, and they have been looking at it for quite some time. The last time the Board of Supervisors looked at it was over a year ago, and they voted 3-2 against forming the CCA. And right after that, the city of San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay decided we're going to do our own thing, and they started trying to form their own CCA, and eventually they decided to join us. I can guess to the concerns and probably share a couple of what they told us. Their major concern was when the concept was presented to them, it shows that there's a possibility that the CCA will have to raise rates by 15% in order to do the things that they wanted to do. Now, I've looked at the study, the technical study that they've done, and I think it was a little off on certain expectations as far as local generation of renewable resources is concerned. And that's what caused probably some of the economics of forming the CCA to be a bit off. So 3 of the 5 supervisors looked at that and were not willing to entertain any possibility or any likelihood that the rates may have to rise. And that's, I think, why they rejected the notion of becoming a CCA. Another thing is that at the time when they were looking at it, PG&E have already was talking about closing down Diablo Canyon, and the supervisors, along with everybody in the community, was asking that the CPUC and will set $250 million for the community to kind of to recover from the fact that Diablo Canyon will be closed, and maybe forming a CCA was not the best thing to do at the time in order to kind of make your point about getting some money set aside to handle issues related to the county. That's my guess is probably another reason why they've decided to push it off. But now the PG&E is solid on closing Diablo Canyon, and on the top of it, they filed for Chapter 11, as you probably know. I think those supervisors now are looking to the CCA, especially joining us, given that we're never said that we will ever push rates above PG&E in order to meet certain policies that you folks put together. And looking at the numbers, looking at the likelihood of gaining by joining us, they're looking at it a lot closer. And we think there's a good likelihood that we'll be able to get the county to come along.
I have one more question with respect to the mid-year budget report.
Yes.
Overall, you said it was a positive 1 million up because the purchases for renewable energy came in lower than budgeted for. Is this a temporary effect that you can trace back to possibly PG&E's bankruptcy, and that the market reacted to that, trying to sell the capacity at a lower price, or why do you think there was a lower margin of purchase?
Yeah, I think it was the forecast. The forecast of power sales was higher than expected. That's why the revenue didn't come in as we expected it to come in. But by the same token, the purchases, we already locked in prices for the purchases, so we ended up pretty much selling more to the wholesale market, a portion of the energy that we locked in, and at a more favorable prices than what we bought at, and that's why the cost was down by 10 million, or a little bit more than what the revenues were down by.
And any other questions? Any member of the public wishing to address the board on this item? Okay, hearing none.
There's a question here from San Luis Obispo.
Okay.
Tom, in the report, can you just provide a little commentary about and I'm just unclear, what authority to revise the PCIA? Does that have to go back to the CPUC, or if you could just walk me through any sort of adjustments, future adjustments, and how that'll occur?
Yeah, PG&E will use the alternate proposed decision that was approved by the PUC as their guide to recalculate the PCIA based on all the new numbers. They've supposedly are working on it. They've been showing signs at what the numbers would look like and making all sorts of adjustments because we keep catching things that they probably haven't done correctly. And eventually, once they develop the PCIA, and the PCIA, by the way, is a different number for every customer class, and they have 36 different rate schedules. So there will be a rate for each one of those customers that relates to the PCIA. Once they get that finalized, they take it to the CPUC for approval, along with the revisions that they're going to make to the generation rates. And once the CPUC stamps it, then that will be the new rates effective July 1st or beyond. Does that answer the question, Derek?
Yeah, great. That's perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to item number 11, appointments of 2019 Chair and Vice Chair. Director Huffaker.
So this was an item that was continued from the last meeting, but I was asked to collect interest from the board for reappointment of appointment of the chair and vice chair, and both Chair Mendez and Vice Chair Corpus expressed a willingness and interest to be reappointed and continue on as chair and vice chair. And so I was recommending reappointment of both Chair Mendez and Vice Chair Corpus, really with the acknowledgement that we're entering into an interesting time with the PG&E bankruptcy, and continuing to monitor and respond to whatever developments might arise out of that, as well as we continue to grow and enroll and expand our footprint. We thought there would be some benefit to the continuity that keeping both Renee and Ray in those positions for the next term would provide to the board. So that's my recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Before the board takes action, a member of the public wishing to address? Okay, hearing none. There's a motion and a second on the table. All in favor? Right, opposed? Thank you. Yeah, there was such a run to. No, thank you. Thank you, Ray, for staying on.
It's a life term, actually.
Okay, before we take any action on that's not on the agenda. Moving on to item number 12, approved microgrid smart connection program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly, I want to point out that this is not an action item. This is just for information, and that's continued from last meeting. And Matt was here to make that presentation for us.
Morning, everybody. So thankfully the wind's not blowing hard enough to knock the power out this time around, right? But we are addressing a concern of power need throughout the region through approaching it with the Microgrid Smart Connect program that we've architected here. I'm just going to walk you through it really quick and then just kind of get your discussion items there. So what is a microgrid? It's effectively it's a small version of the actual grid itself, right? It's a isolated local energy supply that's a multi-component system, and it has a overlay of software that controls all those components in an optimized fashion. So these grids, these microgrids, can effectively serve needs for different energy loads at different sites and areas. And ultimately, as they become connected to the grid, they can have different values and different marketplace opportunities, right? So why should we build them? Why should we get involved in this? Ultimately, we in this area are seeing kind of long wait times from the sitting interconnection group, and it's taken longer than years past. We're in a unique position here with MBCP to be able to fund and manage and create expertise of design and processes to apply that to the actual marketplace and erect these microgrids, so to speak. How does the workflow look moving forward? Our plan is essentially to identify site locations that are optimal for these microgrids. That'll be through an application process. So we have a site host application that's in development. And once that criteria is weighted and set that these sites are the host sites for these microgrids, then we take that host site under evaluation from turnkey. Either you can call it an EPC in the power sector, which is engineering, procurement, construction, or a design build contract in the kind of more architectural design aspect of design, if you will. So we take that to that marketplace. We go out to RFP in the EPC space after we've pre-qualified the EPCs, essentially getting a pool of EPCs that can credibly build these functional microgrids. And then we pick the EPC. MBC selects the EPC to go to work with, and we cut the ribbon, break the ground, and start building the power supply needed for that area. This is kind of the relationship workflow between the contractual relationships between the host site, the EPCs, and ourselves as the parties involved. So you can just kind of see it's an integrated process with all three parties: the host site, the design build contractor, and MBCP sitting in between, kind of facilitating that opportunity. Now we get the timeline. This is the fun part, right? How quickly can we beat that interconnection time that we're up against? So right now, we're going to launch the solicitation for site host applications this month. We're going to be making our selection through into May. In May to June timeframe, we'll be looking at EPCs that are qualified, and then awarding that RFP or going to RFP in that June timeframe to then get responses and award the contract around July for the design build function of the microgrid. Obviously, entitlements and everything else are going to take time, so we're looking at a August to December window of the entitlement process and all the rest of the functional activities to get through to construction and break ground on one of our selected sites. Essentially, this is the fundamental reason why we're doing this, is because we can provide that power and meet our actual goals as an agency. So we're reinvesting in the economy, the local economy, and And we're also contributing renewable generation locally in the Tri-County region, as well as growing our brand and being responsive to what we've seen as a need within our customer base. So that being said, open for any questions.
Any questions on the board? Director Bauman?
If I may, thank you for that presentation. So these would be gas-fired power plants, is that correct?
These won't be. These will be optimized with, I believe Chair Byron had mentioned prior, there will be a multi-component generation. So ideally, the optimized system would be carbon neutral. So gas-fired, yes, but actually could be supplied from a fuel engagement with landfill gas opportunities, which is a destruction of methane. So we actually can go carbon negative. In some instances, we're working out the volumes on what that takes to run those gas-fired generators on the biofuel right now. There's a lot of optimization of systems that we could engage in to really create a robust energy system for a microgrid that is meeting all of our goals as an agency.
And then the contract between the EPC is between the owner and the EPC, not with Monterey Bay Community Power, is that correct?
No, we'll hold the contractual obligations with the EPC to get it constructed, and as well as a obligation between the site host and ourselves to keep that engagement through a financial commitment via the site host. So it'll essentially be a security deposit to get the site constructed, and once we turn that microgrid system on, essentially the site host will start receiving either credits or refunding that development deposit money, so to speak.
So those will be liabilities on Monterey Bay Community Power's balance sheet.
In terms of the EPC contract and getting the balance of plant out there, yes.
And then finally, I assume then, once this thing's up and running, that we still apply for an interconnect.
Exactly. That's I didn't have the little term that I like to have coined here, which is island before interconnect, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly, yeah.
Director Usler?
So microgrids are an essential element of the energy resiliency that the Department of Defense military installations are striving to achieve. Actually, they talk about utility resilience, to include water now. Having said that, is it foreseeable that military installations such as the National Guard in Fort Hunter Liggett and Camp Roberts, which border to San Luis Obispo, can apply for those projects as well and make them pencil out for us as well? Because these are large-scale projects. I think when you're thinking right now, you're thinking about commercial projects that are of smaller scale.
Microgrids are applicable to all facilities, and DoD and their resilience plan and their 14-day window can be extended via microgrids extensively. So yes, and they are in our customer base. So getting them in and addressing their concerns and needs is definitely of interest as well.
So I would encourage staff then to proactively reach out to them, including the military installation in the County of Monterey and City of Monterey, if possible.
Director Bauman?
So I just have a bit of concern about the capital infrastructure going on our balance sheet without a very rigorous analysis. And I know, for example, a lot of cannabis operators are requesting power, and that is, at this point, that's an uncertain business. And so I would be very concerned that we have a committee or a process to rigorously evaluate the business or businesses or communities that we're proposing to put these grids in, so that we can ensure that those liabilities don't accrue to the larger rate base.
Yes, Tom actually mentioned to me that we can't make a cash transaction. So some parties like that of that nature cannot, I was kind of being catty there, but yeah, parties with cash balance sheets can't really function within our system. So the cannabis industry is as they evolve, we could address some of those concerns, correct? And that's not the specific design. So as well as criteria and functioning with having a body review what the projects will be, yes, we'll bring the financial outlay of each project and the balance of plant in front of the boards before we're able to execute the project itself.
Yeah, just to add, generally, whether it's Pacific Gas and Electric or any other utility does look at the financial whereabouts of every company that applies to connect to the grid, and they do require a substantial upfront investment from that company. That money would be returned back to the company over a number of years based on whether their forecast of consumption comes true or not. Yeah, so if they are true to what they said they will do, then they get their money back quickly. If they're not, then their money goes back slowly. Eventually, can take up to 10 years for them to get their money back. And that is some of the conditions that we're going to put on the companies that will apply to have us build a microgrid on their behalf. We definitely know that we are taking some risk in doing so, but that is the only way we're going to be able to harness this economic activity, because right now the market is not providing it, and banks want to make sure that they're going to get their money back, and so they passing that word on to private companies that want to build those microgrids, and those companies in turn are looking to us to be their backstop. And my thinking is, if I'm going to be the backstop, I might as well have that business on my on my balance sheet.
Vice Chair Corpus?
Yeah, Matt, you mentioned there are a number of constrained areas that might want to take microgrids are increasing. Can you quantify that at all in Tri-County? You have a kind of an idea what the market might be expanding?
I've been doing some pretty extensive scouting, and the opportunity is vast all the way down the valley, the Salinas Valley. There's a lot of the agricultural business community that is in desperate need of power and struggling to get power via their entire supply chain. It's not just the growers, it's throughput in the manufacturing process, in the coolers, in every facet of their business line. They're in need of power, whether it's pumping water into the fields or whether it's keeping that cooler going 24/7. So there's opportunities there. There's opportunities to Mr. Isler's point in the Department of Defense as well. There's a lot of resiliency. There's a lot of redundant supply that's needed within the Department of Defense. We've been having discussions with them already as well too. So there are specific needs for distributed generation and islanded opportunities. I don't have a specific value or a specific number to that, but it is pretty extensive in our territory.
Right. I think the ag area on the whole valley has enormous potential. And then, have you any discussions so far with One Water or the Monterey Regional Waste Management District, because they're both into the methane production?
Yes, sir. We actually were just sitting with them last week, and there's definitely interest in modeling how much every microgrid is dynamic in nature, right? So we don't know what size or what capacity or what volumes of offtake of gas agreements that we would need, but those offtake gas agreements can be arranged, and they can be mitigated even from a volatility standpoint. I mean, there's many ways to tie in multi-agency agreements, which is really interesting and a cool collaboration. There's a lot of economic development that this could unlock, and many ancillary opportunities for sure.
Ray asked one of my questions, but thanks for the presentation, Matt. I guess one of my questions, and you alluded to this a little bit in terms of the scouting that you're already doing, but what are we doing to market the program to prospective applicants? And I was going to ask if we have any opportunity sites or partners already identified, which you've already spoken a little bit about.
Yeah, marketing the program and everything else, we've just been in bootstrapping the design of it right now and how we can unroll it and get it off the ground and running so that we can functionally identify the sites and actually get the construction arrangements and everything else in place and what that actually looks like. So it's going to be a heavy month of shaking trees and really getting people to get their applications in and get the right opportunities that are out there in the queue, so to speak, and be able to constructively select the ones that we can approach feasibly.
Any other comment or question? Okay, before opening it to the public, it's going to be a little bit of sound like a commercial, but it's no surprise this is something that I've been very encouraging about, and we've had conversations, and some of the issues that you have brought up have been our challenge as a small city with the city of Gonzales. We've looked at trying to do a project about 24, 25, 30 megawatts. The ag interest from the traditional ag base, not cannabis, is much more straightforward. The cannabis conversation becomes very tricky as far as the backing of, who's going to pay the bill and what happens to this industry since it's so early. And the challenges that we've had have been, okay, you go to the cannabis industry, they're going to need to put up a lot more money than traditional ag. And so when we have been, full disclosure, have been in conversation with the staff about how do we set this up. I think this, frankly, is probably one of the best things we can do over the next 5 or 10 years with this CCA to stimulate the economy. From a job creation, revenue generation, and fulfilling a need that we need for energy. The energy market is changing. PG&E remind us of that again every few years. And I think this is a great opportunity. So just a little bit of a commercial, but I think we're on the right track. But obviously we have to go in with our eyes wide open and mitigate some of the risk. Any member of the public wishing to address the board on this item?
Hi, it's Seth Capron. I'm a member of the Community Advisory Council. I just want to commend staff on the work they're doing on this. It's a great innovative project. In the sense that this is a replacement for the Go Local program, I want to echo what the report from our committee, that we should really focus this on meeting our climate goals as well as the opportunity for business development. And one area where we might have some synergy there is in learning more and more about this, battery storage has really risen to the top of my list in terms of meaningfully being able to add more renewables to the system and really move forward. So there may be some opportunities here to add batteries in a way that a battery has more value in the short term for a microgrid, and then when a grid connection is made, then it's a resource for the agency. So I hope that that becomes part of the picture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Dayton, representing Clearost Options and Clean Energy. We are very supportive of this microgrid proposal. In fact, I routinely come across opportunities where I think microgrids should come into place. I've sent a few of these to Mark Adotto. I saw a tweet from the head of the teachers union for Salinas Union High School District complaining that the power is always going out at a couple of the schools there. And I was thinking, well, maybe they need a microgrid. I saw a situation where a police station in Stockton, they had an emergency backup power system. The power went out through PG&E, it went back on, and then the system went down. It actually didn't work. There's an opportunity there. I know there is a college marine laboratory that I found out has backup generators, and I said, oh, what's powering those generators? Figuring that they'd be on the cutting edge of environmentalism, and they said, oh, they're diesel powered. And I think there's a great I like to see the idea of decentralizing the power grid. I like to see the idea of moving things away from a centralized government or corporate power running everything. And this is a great way to encourage local business development, local jobs, and head in a visionary direction in terms of how civilization obtains electricity. So please continue to pursue this. I think it would be great if you're really focused on this particular area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Kevin Smith
morning.
with Energy Systems International. I just wanted to get a general idea of what your criteria will be for selecting the pilot sites.
So right now, the way it's set up is to essentially identify the sites themselves. So go out and kind of scout the territory, so to speak. And then we have to take a feasibility look at all of those sites. So our criteria for weight on that is the economic feasibility of the site itself, and what we can actually functionally do, as well as interconnection agreements, the time and the queue that they're waiting for. That's going to be a factor in this as well. We have, and as we release the site host application, we're going to be developing the weighted criteria in that time frame, so that we can truly make a more detailed, granular selection of the site.
Thanks, Matt. Any other questions or comments? Oh, great, thank you. Moving on to item 13, approve proposed reclassification in addition to MBCP staff positions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Chairman Byron alluded to earlier, we are getting way too busy. We got 2 boards and advisory commission, as well as 2 new committees that were formed, the executive committee as well as the audit and finance. We also got the risk oversight committee. It's becoming really a daunting task to try to clerk and be the secretary for all those committees, and at the same time be able to do a solid job on being an executive assistant at the same time. So we decided to take those 2 positions and kind of separate them, so we don't have a single person doing all of it. We'd like to have a board clerk that will be focused entirely on that. Then we will be requesting from the policy board next month to add, actually in June, to add a second position that will be focused entirely on executive assistant as well as office management. And in doing so, we'll probably will be able to handle all that work that comes our way with, and hopefully without making too many mistakes in the process, which obviously when you do so much, things do fall through the cracks, and it becomes tough to manage. So that's the request that we plan to make to the policy board, basically to separate the board clerk position from the executive assistant position. I'm glad to answer any questions, and Tiffany here is the one that put the job classification together, so she'll help me answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay. Any member of the public wishing to address the board on this item? Okay, hearing none. I'd like to bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board? And it's an action item, right?
It is, we would need a motion.
Motion for approval?
Been moved in second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hey, thank you. Okay, moving on to the board member reports and comments. Any member of the board wishing to say anything that we haven't covered yet on the agenda? Great. Hearing none. Motion to adjourn. So, thank you.
Thank you.